There's a few things you probably expect from me if you're watching a lot of my videos. One is media criticism, and in the past year, pretty strong positions on the Second Amendment. As most of you know by now, because you may have heard last year, or heard me talk about it recently, Steven Crowder sent me a SIG M400, a beautiful and amazing rifle. Took it to the range this weekend. We had a couple different instructors, and everyone was extremely impressed with it. Crowder got me this weapon because I came out and said, it's time to get guns. I can't keep, I've been thrust into this. You start to realize the dangers of the world and who you can and can't count on. You need to take personal responsibility for your safety, and you should have basic training for firearms because they're real. They exist. So Crowder sent me this weapon, and due to restrictive gun laws in New Jersey, it was basically impossible for me to get. They had to do a bunch of modifications to it. It could only be sent to a certain store, and it was quite frankly difficult. Well, it got sent out to West Virginia this time, which is extremely easy for me to get. So there's good news. It would seem that, looking at a lot of the data, gun rights advocates are actually winning, and the gun control groups are losing. And I have a story here out of Arkansas that you need to share. Armed citizen uses rifle to stop attempted mass shooting. It's a very simple story. It's a tragic story. It's horrifying. Some people still lost their lives, but it is your basic good guy with a gun saving dozens, if not several dozen individuals. You need to share this story. You know why? When we get a gun control area, and this is why, I mentioned Crowder sending me the weapon and going to the range, because my opinion is dramatically different this year than it was 2 years ago. When you get these stories about gun-free zones and mass shootings, the left, basing their knowledge, I shouldn't say the left, sorry, I got to correct that. The leftists really do want guns. Not that they want guns for the far right, but they do want guns. It's the establishment Democrat types. They base their information off of movies and video games and have no idea what they're talking about. They then end up passing laws where you will see mass shootings, tragedies, horrifying moments where dozens of people could lose their lives and no one is able to defend themselves or protect themselves. They like to argue that there's no such thing as a good guy with a gun who can actually stop it because it'd be chaos, and that's not true. Now, I know this story is one story, but this is why I say you need to share this. An armed citizen stopped a mass shooting. If this individual wasn't there with the rifle, do you know what the news would be? Chaos, mass tragedy, dozens lose their lives. We must ban guns. And this is the problem of media bias. Because there was an individual who was armed, trained, and able to stop this vicious murderer, they won't report the story. Now, of course, there are several outlets reporting the story. Don't get me wrong. It won't become the national conversation. The leftists, correcting myself again, the Democrats won't make this a big news story. They won't prop it up. They won't put it on TV. You won't see it on the mainstream networks. And then people won't hear about it. But if this person was not there, I assure you, you would have, and it would be used against you and me and anyone else who wants to exercise their right to keep and bear arms. I was talking with this journalist, Forrest Cooper. He's with Recoil Magazine. We had him on the show last night. And we were talking about how suppressors in movies are like pew, pew, not a real thing. But people think it is, so they advocate for the banning of these particular accessories, and it becomes extremely hard, if not prohibitively bureaucratic. It's extremely difficult to actually get one now. It takes 6 to 12 months, depending on who you ask. They become NFA items. Let me read for you the story, and talk about what's happening with this armed citizen. But I will tell you this. I have good news across the board. Second Amendment sanctuaries, constitutional carry. Gun rights advocates seem to be winning this fight. And as more and more conflict ensues and more people go out and buy guns because of the riots, just more victories across the board for those who believe in the right to keep and bear arms. BearingArms.com reports a shooting in Fort Smith, Arkansas, that left an elderly woman dead could have had many more victims, according to neighbors, if an armed citizen hadn't stepped up and put down the killer on Saturday morning. Police say that 87-year-old Lois Hicks was shot and killed in her apartment by 26-year-old Zachary Arnold, who then continued to fire rounds from a rifle at other apartments in the complex on the city's south side, targeting other residents. Neighbors who witnessed the shooting say Arnold was trying to persuade people to come outside of their apartment buildings. He was yelling and screaming, "You guys get out here, come out here. Everyone get out of this building right now," says Janie Poe, a resident of the apartment complex. Another resident, Amber Lane, says Lois Hicks and Arnold live in the same building. She says Hicks and another neighbor went outside to console Arnold, but when they saw the gun, they ran back inside their apartments. There were two older women. Both had come out. One of them had ran back in, and the other one ran back in, but she didn't close her door. Then he walked in, and he did what he did, says Lane. Neighbors say Arnold could open fire on anyone in an apartment building, so they took cover while he continued to shoot into the residences. Some say they are grateful for the one neighbor who stepped in and put an end to the shooting. If he didn't do that, who knows how much worse this could have gotten. That neighbor who put an end to the shooting apparently grabbed a rifle of his own and fatally shot Arnold, though police haven't released many details of the incident. While we don't yet know what motivated Arnold to kill his elderly neighbor, it's clear that, as resident Amber Lane told local media, there could have been many more victims were it not for the quick response by the armed citizen. This is a horrifying story. Stories like this are always horrifying. I don't want anyone to lose their lives. I don't want this guy, Arnold, to lose his life either. But he was a dangerous individual who was hurting people, literally killing them, and he was stopped. And it is sad. We shouldn't have to accept these things. But what's the solution to it? Unfortunately, we may have to accept the reality of life in that crazy people sometimes do crazy things, and we need to be prepared to stop them. So when I say we shouldn't accept things like this, what I mean to say is we should work towards ways of preventing these things. Unfortunately for us, many of these establishment Democrat types propose laws based on ignorance, and they make things worse. There's probably some things we could do to prevent things like this, but we already have background checks. We already, on the background check form, you have to say whether or not you are mentally unfit or do drugs. So it's hard to know what can be done. You know, we have these celebrities saying, just do something, do something. I'm not sure do something means anything to anyone. And it may be that we don't accept these situations. We need to accept that more people need to be armed. And if these two older women were, then we wouldn't have to say these things are just going to happen because maybe they could have defended themselves. But again, you're not going to see this in the media. They're not going to tell you about this. This is not going to be used as, it may be used by some advocates, but it's not going to be put forward in policy discussions for the most part. But you know, if this man wasn't there, yeah, it would. It would be every major discussion. It would be the headline news. That's what they'd be saying. And that's exactly what Bearing Arms says. Don't expect the national media to give the story the same wall-to-wall coverage it gives other incidents with higher counts. The Washington Post and New York Times won't be editorializing about the need for more armed citizens like they regularly opine about the need for more gun control. Instead, the story will be quickly forgotten by the media. Heck, I can't find any mention whatsoever of the attack in the local paper, though a couple of the Fort Smith television stations had coverage of the shooting over the weekend. The lack of coverage highlights a serious problem within news media. When evil individuals successfully carry out their plans, the press is eager to spread the news far and wide. When a good guy puts a stop to these attacks, the story is relegated to a brief mention on the local news. If we are lucky, a national outlet like ABC News will post a story online, while ignoring the story completely on its actual broadcasts. While the media may not be eager to report on defensive gun uses that save numerous lives, you can be sure that the armed citizen is a hero to those in the apartment complex who could have been the next target. People are alive today because someone had the opportunity and the means to stop this attack before Arnold could murder any more of his neighbors, even if the journalists in our midst are loath to acknowledge that fact. And that's why I said for the fifth time now, these stories need to be shared because the media won't do it. Now, they'll report on it. You'll get blurbs. But it's no surprise I go to bearingarms.com to show you the news. It's up to us to make sure that our fellow citizens are informed of the importance of their rights. The Second Amendment. I'm probably not going to be able to recite it verbatim, but a well-regulated militia being necessary for a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What does it mean to have a well-regulated militia? It doesn't mean government regulated. What does it mean to be a free state? It doesn't mean to stop tyrannical government. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. What does that mean? Very simply, I think it's literal. The people have a right to keep them and bear them, holding them, using them. A lot of these leftists, actual leftists, woke leftists. Now I'm trying to make sure I'm differentiating properly. They'll talk about like the 1619 Project. They'll say that police forces are descendants of slave patrols. That's not true. While some are, most aren't. Policing was imported. I believe many European countries started creating centralized law enforcement. At the time, before police in this country, we had local militias. A local militia is what dealt with problems like this. So, well-regulated, meaning capable and not necessarily even trained, just means capable. It could be a reference to working firearms. It could be a reference to people who know how to use those firearms. It is not a reference to the government coming in and telling people what they can or can't do. That's the antithesis of the Bill of Rights, restrictions on government. The government can't infringe your right to keep and bear arms. Why would anyone believe they meant the government would have to regulate that militia? So let's talk about what was going on back then. Crime. The local militia would deal with it, which means they needed to be armed. Why? A free state is about more than just tyrannical government. But don't get me wrong, tyrannical government is a part of this. If the government became tyrannical, like it was with the empire, the British, then people had a right to defend themselves. If local government went rogue, defend themselves. If foreign adversaries invaded, a free state requires a well-regulated militia. Defend themselves. And general enemies, both foreign or domestic, which could include a lunatic attacking people. The militias would deal with it. That's Second Amendment. That's why the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, I'll tell you there is some good news. Even CNN now has to acknowledge, yeah, they're probably losing the gun control debate. And that's why I was so careful to say leftists want guns. Now, Karl Marx said, under no pretext shall arms and ammunition be surrendered. The workers should frustrate this with force if necessary. And so a lot of these leftists are in favor of owning guns. Now, they'd take your guns away, for sure, the moment they gained power. But hey, I'll take what I can get for the time being, because any group that's advocating for the right to keep and bear arms is good for the rest of us. You need to defend yourself if someone tries to take them away by whatever means is appropriate. And I often would say we absolutely follow the law for one reason. We're not at the point where we're not seeing trains, full of people or anything like that. So for the time being, we go through a legal process. And I bring this up because we're winning. We're winning. I mean, look, I'm a recent convert. I was like, well, gun control maybe. And here I am like in a photo on my Instagram with a Barrett M82A1 having a good time with some 50 BMG. So you're getting a lot of first-time gun buyers. A lot of liberals are switching over and saying, you know what? We got to have a right to defend ourselves. In this story from CNN, they say the fight against gun control has some very surprising new allies. Yeah, no, it's not surprising. You know what they discovered? Minority groups want guns. How is that surprising to me? You run news story after news story saying that Asians are under attack, that minority groups are under attack. Give them the guns, okay? I'm not surprised at all. I'd be surprised if they weren't going out and buying guns after all the fear-mongering from the mainstream media. CNN Business reports, the once mighty NRA, whose bankruptcy bid was shot down by a federal judge, has played a much less active role in the current gun control debate. In its place, gun rights supporters have found additional political allies, minority-led pro-Second Amendment groups such as the National African American Gun Association, you guys are awesome, and the DC Project, a women-centered firearms education organization, also awesome. Don't forget Maj Touré and Black Guns Matter. Excellent work, Maj. Republicans have invited leaders from these groups to speak on Capitol Hill to counter emotional testimony from the families of gun violence victims by Democrats. Firearms trade groups have also built inroads with leaders from the Pink Pistols, an LGBTQ gun group, awesome group, guys, and Asian American and Pacific Islander gun owners, which formed in March amidst a surge in anti-Asian hate crimes. Absolutely tremendous respect to all of those groups. While we may disagree on, critical race theory or whatever, we can all come to an agreement that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is good news. Republicans have a diverse group of many leftists, minorities, LGBTQ groups, and just general constitutionalists who are exercising their rights and saying, F you, no, to government restrictions. Check this out over the AP. Second Amendment sanctuaries facing their first court test in Oregon. Okay, sure. We'll see what happens. But there are many states. 1,200 local governments have adopted Second Amendment sanctuaries where they inform local law enforcement you cannot enforce federal restrictions. Good news. So I decided to look up constitutional carry. You see, where I live, we're in an area where this production and everything is actually between 3 different states. Almost 4, because you've got Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, all extremely close to each other. West Virginia is constitutional carry. You can walk out of your house and just carry all your guns. And the worst thing that's going to happen is someone's going to ask you about them and waste your time. A cop might stop you and ask you any particular reason you're carrying like 12 weapons and be suspicious for sure, but you have a right to do it. So if the Black Panthers want to march around in any city, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's fantastic. I think they should. Now, leftists who want to march around with guns, I'm okay with. But importantly, when they start blocking streets, aiming those weapons at people, smashing out windows, no, that's crossing the line. And now I think you should be disarmed, at least momentarily, because you're committing crimes. And through due process, you can have your guns taken away. Out in West Virginia, constitutional carry, relatively new, which is surprising to me because I assumed places like Texas and West Virginia were going to be just, gun places. You get the Family Guy joke where Brian, the dog, he goes to a liquor store and he buys a bottle of whiskey and the guy goes, here's your whiskey and your gun. And he's like, my gun? He's like, that's right. State law. You buy whiskey, you get a gun. People think that's what Texas is like. And it's hilarious that it's not. I recently learned, and I don't know if this is true. You guys can fact check me on this one, that Texas, they're just now passing constitutional carry. Before this, you had to go and take a course to prove you could use the weapon properly. That to me is amazing because you got a lot of places where you don't got to do that. Let me show you something. Not only do we have Second Amendment sanctuaries, I pulled up constitutional carry over on Wikipedia, and I saw this little graphic right here. In 1986, most states were no issue for concealed carry. Then many states started becoming shall issue, turning blue. This means shall issue means they have to give you. May issue is yellow, means they're probably not going to give you the weapons. The permit. Here's what's interesting, though. Unrestricted. In 2007, 2008, 2009, we start to see, at 2010, the emergence of unrestricted concealed carry. One by one, over the past decade, more and more states have been adopting constitutional carry. And in 2021, this is the craziest thing. In 1986, most states were no issue for concealed carry. And now, as of 2021, you have a large portion that are shall issue, meaning they can be prohibitively restrictive. It can be annoying, but they're going to give you your permit. Or how about this? On the screen, all of the green is constitutional carry. Oh, you love to see it. You got West Virginia, you got Iowa, you got all these states, Idaho, constitutional carry. Now, Texas right now is still listed as shall issue, but constitutional carry means you ain't got to do anything. You walk right out, you have your weapon. Now, I think everybody should get training. I think people should be responsible, and there is firearm insurance that a lot of people I know get. It's very smart to have. It's not mandatory, though. It's not expensive, and they cover your costs in the event that you need to use your weapon within certain restrictions. But I just think it's beautiful to see more and more of this country is becoming pro-gun rights. Isn't that fascinating? May issue. Maryland may issue. Look at New Jersey. New Jersey is may issue, no issue in practice. I lived in New Jersey for a little while. And I asked, how do I get a gun and then be able to keep it on my person to protect myself. Well, I'm a particularly high profile individual. We're running a decently sized business. It's a small business, but we're growing. And so we handle decently large transactions sometimes. I got to go to the bank. I got to protect myself. People can find out where I live easily. I was told basically by everyone, never going to happen. It is no issue in practice. They call it may issue, but legally, they will just deny you at every turn. You need to have a justification as to why you want the weapon. You've got to, say everything I said. And then they'll say, we just don't think you actually need it. In Maryland, we're at this intersection now. They say you need a legitimate reason. It is may issue, though. I was told by many people that basically if I were to tell them what I just said, high profile business, large transactions, you got to go get your handgun qualifying license or whatever. Then you'd have to go get fingerprinted. It's an arduous process, and they'll give you a concealed carry, which you can then use. But look at all these shall issue states. It's still a bit prohibitive and annoying because you've got to go through a process, but it's not that bad in most of these states. Pennsylvania is actually pretty good. All that green, all that constitutional carry popping up over the past 10 years, you'll love to see it. So these gun control people, I don't want to say they're the minority because I looked up some polling data and it's pretty split. Younger people tend to favor gun control laws. That's a problem moving forward because if people don't reject that, it could get restrictive. 18 to 34-year-olds voting for gun control is dumb. However, I think once people are responsible more for themselves, living on their own, paying their bills, and they start thinking, I'm not going to rely on the police. If you want to abolish the police, you probably want to get a gun. So I think it's good news across the board. I'm sad about this story, the opening story I reported on. I wish people didn't lose their lives. I'm sad this man did these things. I'm sad that he was stopped in the way that he was. But life is not candy canes and rainbows. It's not magic and foofy pillows and pastel rooms with beanbag chairs. Sometimes people do bad things. And whether with a gun or anything else, it's just, unfortunately, it's life. I was talking recently with Forrest from Recoil about directed energy weapons. The reality is it's really easy to break and to hurt. So I think you need to have the ability to defend yourself. And that includes body armor too, and training and understanding how this stuff works and what you need to do and to be safe. It also means you need to understand when you're in your home what kind of weapon is appropriate for you if you're in a city that allows it. You might want frangible, hollow point, something like that won't overpenetrate. You might want birdshot. Take it from Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle says birdshot, buckshot, birdshot, or whatever, right? The first are just a warning shots, pepper them up a little bit, and then you get serious. But I think don't take advice from me on this stuff. Talk to instructors, talk to security, individuals, talk to your local police department to figure out what's legal and appropriate for you, but you should defend yourself. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.